You can hear me well. I don't have
Yes.
to.
No, no, no. It's perfect. People are already waiting. Yes, sir. We are live now. Ma'am, we are scheduled for 2 hours, so don't no hurry. It's totally up to you. Uh, and I request you to include your experience, like your postdoc in London or other things, so people also can. Okay. Uh, Tamina, okay, we should start. It's 11 now. Thanks everyone for joining this special series. As you know, this is the plant science platform, but we also conduct a uh, women in science series to motivate the all women and not only the women, all the youngsters, including everyone. So I'm very happy today we have a emerged scientist from either Pune. My friend Dr. Taminat Kam from Dhaka University will help me to host this session. We are going for the short talk and the totally interactive session. So please put your questions in YouTube. I'm collect all of them and make ready for the speaker. And we already constructed questions with more or less covered all the scenarios. But if we miss something, please let us know. We'll do it. And this is the interactive session, so not worry, and it's not a show plant biology seminar. So your every question is very important rather than if what plant or not topic or of topic, but it's very important for us. Uh, I request Tamina to take the in charge of today's hosting. I'll be here to collect and others' work. So please, Tamina, it's now your responsibility.
Thank you, Shubho. Good morning, everyone. Today we have with us Dr. Vinita Bal. Dr. Vinita Bal is a trained physician who worked as an immunology researcher throughout the working life. She did her MBBS from BJ Medical College, Pune, and MD from University of Bombay. At present, she is affiliated with Indian Institute of Science Education and Research as an professor emeritus. From 1990 to 2060, she worked as a staff scientist at the National Institute of Immunology, New Delhi. In between 1982 to 1990, she worked as a postdoctoral scientist at Hopkins Institute, Mumbai, and University of London, UK. She published more than 100 original research papers and 30 plus reviews and other articles. She was a guide to about 20 students for their PhD, teacher of immunology to many. Outside of her professional work, she is interested in issues related to feminism, science, society, peace movement, etc. And she have worked in various coalitions formed by the civil society initiatives over the years. Various NGOs that she worked with in more sustained fashion are Soheli Women's Resource Center, Delhi, Delhi Science Forum, Nari Shamata Manch, Pune. The status of women in science has been an area of interest and work for her about 20 years. She was a member of a task force on women in science set up by the government of India between 2004 to 2008. We are lucky to have you, ma'am, today with us. I gave just a small introduction of her, but she is more than that. Now, ma'am, I'm inviting you to start the talk, please. Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, you have to unmute yourself. Yeah.
Thank you, Tamina. Thank you, Shuo. Let me share the screen. I'm going to use the, where is this? Yeah, can you see the screen now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, okay. So I'm going to give an overview of what I think about women in science and its relationship to the of women and science to the society. And after that, we can have more interactive session. I thought that my talk initially would provide you with background to ask more pertinent questions. So as I said, it is a connect between women, science, and society that I'm going to talk about. So, and this talk I intend to divide in three different areas. First is women and everyday science. The second will be women as teachers and educators. And the third will be women as scientists. So essentially trying to cover as much wide spectrum as possible. So let's begin with women and everyday science. And here I'm going to give you examples of what women do and when we and where we do not think that there is any science involved. I don't know, Bangladesh, India, in many rural areas, at least in this part of South Asia, Southeast Asia, women still use coal fire for cooking. And if you ask me for sure, somebody who has been brought up only in the cities, I will not be able to do this process very efficiently because you have to know how much coal to add, how much to fuel to add, and how to light it, and how to keep it going. So there is a science and technology involved in it, which we do not think of as something that is part of everyday science. The second example is, again, those of you who have a sweet tooth would know how easy it is to savor gulab jamuns or laddus, as I have written. I'm sure many other dessert items are also part of this list. But making sugar syrup is a very tricky issue. If you make it too light, if you make it too mature, so to say, then things can go wrong. And women handle it so easily. So for making gulab jam, you need what we used to call a light sugar syrup as compared to something else. And this is what nobody understands, that this can be actually measured. You put a thermometer in at a certain temperature, you put the sugar and water boiling for X many minutes to get this kind of sugar syrup versus that kind of sugar syrup. So there is science involved in it, and women do it without even anybody else acknowledging it. This is not only crossing a busy road is not only a woman's job, but it is for everybody. And I'm sure you have not probably realized, but somebody who is coming from a village for the first time in a big city and is trying to cross a road, that person encountering with vehicles and getting into an accident is much higher as compared to somebody who has been accustomed to it. And this crossing a busy road is based on, you know, whether there is a vehicle coming from right side, is it a bicycle, is it a two-wheeler or a four-wheeler, what speed it is going to be, how long is it going to take me to cross that section of the road. All of these are actually mathematical calculations which we do in our mind. That's why somebody who has lived in the city does not encounter a major mishap crossing a busy road. But this is something that also women do very efficiently and nobody appreciates. That's why I'm calling it as everyday science. Beyond this, of course, washing vegetables before cooking. This is something that is mostly women's arena. because men normally, especially in South Asia and Southeast Asia, that I'm aware of, do not help in cooking, though pandemic may have changed a few things here and there. So cleanliness and personal and family hygiene. This is also important. Both washing vegetables as well as hygiene together result in prevention of diseases like typhoid or cholera or diarrheas, so that it is important for us to remain clean, to eat good food, clean food, and so on and so forth. And that involves science, the understanding of science. So these are everyday opportunities which women use, and in a sense, that should make not just women, because I'm sure I can also find more examples for men, but I'm focusing on women today. So this provides for being a rational per individual. This also inculcates so-called scientific temper, or I would say it should inculcate scientific temper, which is not so commonly observed in many people in everywhere pretty much in the world. What I'm going to move to now is to ask a question: do women get adequate opportunities, or is there an impact of patriarchy? Since we are mostly, all of you are also from science, the natural sciences in students do not necessarily get to learn about words like patriarchy. So this is a cartoon which I'm showing, which will actually help you in introducing, in me introducing you to what is the notion of patriarchy. In the leftmost one, what you see, let me see if I can get the pointer going. Okay. Okay. So in the leftmost one, what you see is what we call as notion of equality, which means everybody around is given exactly the same help, exactly the same opportunity. And then this is what happens. Three people with unequal heights can never be equal if the same height is, same stool is provided to all three of them. So what do we mean by equity? So equality is what everybody talks about, but I think equity is more important, because inequity, the inadequacies or the deficits in the human beings, in their living condition, in their, say, for example, caste related inequities, all of these are taken into account and appropriate help is provided, so that for watching that cricket match, what you see in the middle panel is equity. Somebody who doesn't need active help. And many of us, if I'm talking, since I'm talking from Pune, I can say people like me who are sort of upper caste Hindus in India, especially men. I still have women, and hence some kind of discrimination coming my way. But upper caste Hindu men in India, for example, will be like the blue guy in blue t-shirt, and other people, women may be like a guy, the young lad in the red t-shirt, and even there would be less privileged people who may belong to what we call as Dalits in India or Muslims in India, and many more religious minorities or black people in the developed countries, in the countries where like US or Europe. So all of these fall into a group where more help is needed, and that is what we call as equity. And what I desire for, even for women, is equity rather than equality. And third picture is reality. I don't need to elaborate on this. It is quite apparent that how many more opportunities are available for really, again, India-centric comment, upper caste Hindu males. And then the lesser and lesser and lesser opportunities are available to many other groups in the society. So now let me try to define patriarchy for you. So what you saw is the outcome of patriarchy, where there are inequalities. But patriarchy is a social system in which positions of dominance and privilege are primarily held by men. And the term patriarchy is used in anthropology also to describe a family, or clan controlled by the father or the eldest male or group of males. And again, Khap Panchayat is something that you might be familiar with, where there are caste based or a small subcaste based groups which are called panchayats, and those are normally headed by elderly wise men. There are hardly any women who are represented in that, and as a result there is a problem about Khap panchayats giving decisions which can be problematic for underprivileged countries or underprivileged communities. And for young people who are probably listening to me, something like love jihad, which is described again in Indian context, is an important problem, that young people are not allowed to choose their partner. It is dictated by what is expected of them, and that in a sense is patriarchy. As I said, it manifests as subtle or overt discrimination experienced by women, underprivileged groups. This is something that I just mentioned, so I'll move on. So now I'm moving to women as teachers and educators, and what is the impact of patriarchy on this. I'm going to give you some data. Again, unfortunately, this is restricted to India. I didn't go get data from other countries or didn't have so much of time to look at it. But I think the many issues can be generalized. In India, women as teachers in pre-primary and primary school are in majority. Some reports, in some cases, it is as high as 80%, which is very, very significant as compared to about 50% and less population of women in India. And this information is collected from 2019-2020 proper report, which is published in India. So what could be the reasons? I mean, here you may claim that women are so much favored rather than women being disfavored because of patriarchy. But now I will tell you how patriarchy is also responsible for women getting concentrated even when in the pre-primary and primary schools. The claim is because women give birth to children, they are good at handling young children. They normally bring it up, so they will be good. So very young children who are going to the school and there is trauma associated with it, women are the only ones who can handle it. So men can shrug off responsibility and say women should do it. There is also a convenience of limited working hours, because preschool, pre-primary and primary schools do not run for 6-8 hours. So women can do their home chores in the house and still do some earning by going to by teaching into this pre-primary primary schools. There are also a point which is again, as I said, points of convenience, that there are if you look at the salaries and compare them with primary school and say college teachers, the salaries for a primary school are much less in India. This is not the case in the developed world, and that is why the patterns would be are likely to be somewhat different. But in India, the lower the educational status, in the sense pre-primary primary teachers would earn less, higher secondary they would probably earn more, and college education would earn even more. So poor salaries, so women are pushed into those areas because of, again, what I'm calling as patriarchy. And that's what I'm saying, that this is all commensurate with patriarchal attitudes of the society, so that where there is where it is inconvenient or not very rewarding for men in the family to work, reluctantly women can be pushed and they can work there. So there are further data on women as teachers and educators that I want to tell you. So women as teachers in higher educational institutes definitely show lower proportions as compared to pre-primary and primary. The women's enrollment for PhD, these again are, I'm afraid, India-based data, 2020, 2021. So women's enrollment in PhD is 49%, which is really, really remarkable, and one should be proud of. The pride disappears because as we go ahead, women as associate professors, there is a fall in the proportion that you see here. If you look at the full professors, it comes down to 28%. So if the women, 49% women finish the PhD, meaning of all the students, why are there only 28% women professors, and why is the dominance of men coming into picture? This again, as I said, is what is an impact of patriarchy. And steady decrease in the percentage of women at senior positions is a problem. Now let's move to women as scientists. So obviously, since we are going higher up in the ladder in a manner of speaking, then the numbers of women scientists are much lower. Here I'm going to show you some data from India and some data globally. These are the data. I work in ICER Pune, and this is the proportion of women faculty members in all ICERs. So x-axis says Barampur, Bhopal, Calcutta, Mohali, Pune, Trivandrum, and Tirupati. So in all of these, the red bars are indicating frequency or proportion of women. And what you see is that Pune and Tirupati are close to 20%, Mohali is a little less, Barampur is much worse, and so is Thiruvananthapuram. So this shows us that when it's a question of getting assistant professorship, associate professorship, or professorship in ICERs, the women are completely, not I shouldn't say completely, but seriously sidelined. They do not get jobs. And the reasons for that, I'll try to address to some extent as we go along. So this is the international status. And here you see Oxford, Cambridge in UK, Caltech, Stanford, MIT, Harvard, Princeton, all in USA, Imperial College again in UK, University of Chicago again in US, and ETZ Zurich is Switzerland. So this is the data which a student had from Pune University, Savitribai Phule Pune University, had collected and published into. So data are from 2018 and it was published in 2019. But here also globally, you see that somewhere it is, say, Oxford is higher than 20%, closer to 27%, but otherwise the picture is not particularly different. So what is it that happens? Or women, what is the other situation? So more information on Indian women scientists. So proportion of women scientists in total natural sciences is even lower than women teachers. It is varying between 12 to 16% in most instances. You saw somewhere 20, but those are 20, 22 are exceptions. Different reports say 12 to 16%. With seniority, proportion is much lower, as in women teachers. There is also something which is very prestigious in India. It's called Shanti Swarup Bhatnagar Award, which is given to young scientists, which means below the age of 45 years. It started very early. Until 2023, there were 583 awards. Men, 564. Women, 19, which is 3.2%. And no woman was awarded in the last 2 years. So I'm going to show you a picture. So what you see as the orange sliver in this whole circle is 3.2%. How few women actually get the Bhatnagar Award, and it is considered extremely prestigious. In fact, it gives opportunity. It is for women and men to become heads of the institution, directors and vice chancellors, and so on and so forth. So if there are very few women who are getting the award, you can imagine women in leadership positions would be very, very, very few. And that is a problem. And that problem is global. So if women are so few in senior positions, do they ever play any role in policy making? Global, Nobel Prizes. This year was a particularly different year because many women were awarded Nobel Prizes. But if you look at the global picture, this is what it is. Okay, different categories: peace and literature. These are non-science categories: physiology or medicine, chemistry and physics. These are the real natural science categories, so to say. And in economic sciences is also considered a social science. So total awards have been listed, and what you see on the right column is the percentage of women. Peace and literature actually is 16 and 14% women. As compared to that, other 3-4 disciplines are between 1.8 and 5.6%, which is quite pathetically low. So why are so few women getting Nobel Prizes and as compared to peace and literature? And essentially, this tends to say that women are idiots. They don't deserve the becoming senior professors or head of the institutions or Nobel laureates or whatever. And as I was saying, when I began this talk, I told you how women use common sense and science in everyday life, which was the examples from the kitchen and the health and so on. So it's not that women are idiots. It is that women do not get opportunities, they do not get equity. As I had shown you in the picture, equity in the way they can choose their life. This is what I would like to mention, that bottom of the pyramid is where women as university students are, much larger proportion. Proportions go on decreasing as women become senior and senior, from PhD students to very senior scientific, senior leaders in the arena. So they lose out with increasing seniority, thus depriving them from leadership positions, policy making opportunities, and this picture is actually shared really globally. So that's what I wanted to highlight, that while I'm focusing a lot more on the Indian scenario, the picture is not globally different. Different extent of efforts are being made so that women can be brought in larger numbers in the field and retained in the field. And one Indian report, which is an old report, it was published in 2010, but this report gives us some insights as to why why are we losing women. As I said, at PhD level, they are 50%, and very senior positions, if you look at the heads of the institutions, one can actually count them in India on the tips of one fingers of one hand, at most, maybe certainly less than 10. So this is the report, which is called Trained Scientific Women Power. How much are we losing and why? This is the Indian Academy of Science and an institute called NIAS in Bangalore, who from where the women worked on the report. And this survey was conducted across India with 568 women scientists and 226 men scientists. As we know, whenever we are comparing, doing any science, appropriate controls are necessary. So, in that sense, this survey, though it's a sociological endeavor, it actually collects data from women as well as men. And these were the scientists who had PhD in science, engineering, or medicine, and the survey covered women and men who were currently engaged in scientific research, which means they could continue with their career options. So it was research and teaching, or engaged in jobs other than scientific research or teaching, and even those who were currently not employed, which means who had dropped out. So getting their voice was also important for this survey, and that is I'm going to share a few of the observations which are really interesting to note. So what are the findings from the report? Many more women scientists are single, about 14% as compared to men. And what is the implication of this? That if you want to have career as you want to, as easily and as uninterruptedly as men do, then family, getting married, having family comes in the way. So some women scientists, or many more women scientists, prefer to remain single for pursuit of their career. That's the sort of take home, which as you can see is very different proportions between men and women. Women look for or are forced into jobs which provide defined working hours, for example, teaching. Teaching load is also quite high, but those of you who are doing science research, you would realize that even if the 6 or 8 hours are over, there is something like writing project proposals, getting funding, writing reports of these funded projects, writing manuscripts, publishing, looking at students' thesis, correcting these theses. All of this does not fit into 8 hours easily. So women, and now of course beyond this is thinking about where is your research going, what are the new avenues you can choose, and so on. All of this goes much beyond defined working hours, and that flexibility most women do not get. As a result, you see much fewer women choosing scientists as a job, and they get into teaching jobs. This, as I said, this is also a finding from the report, so this is not made up by me. The third point is caregiving responsibilities. Those at both ends of the age spectrum, children as well as elderly, is considered as a woman's responsibility, whether she is working or not working, and these pose as major hurdles in pursuing career. So now let's further define what are the common problems that women encounter at workplace. So social issues at the workplace, and very mundane issues, and this is something many of you may or may not have experienced, but since I'm much older than you, I remember days when some of my colleagues my age and thereabouts used to say that in XYZ department there aren't women's toilets. So this is not making up. But nowadays, absence of toilets is less of a problem because the awareness has gone up. Many of us have been talking about it and pushing for better infrastructure. But creches are still a problem. Every institute which has women employees, actually, honestly speaking, scientists and other academic staff, other support staff who are in the childbearing age. So women are described as childbearing age, but men are responsible for that child. So even men have kids, but it is considered as a woman's responsibility. That is why, unless there are large number of women who are employed, creche is not thought of. Once creche is established, both men and women tend to put their children, youngsters, into the creche. But if you see any man, in any of the scientific institutions who has been very, very, very proactive in setting up a creche, I would like to know. I haven't come across one so far, so this is something that I'm still waiting to hear from. There is also discrimination at the workplace due to patriarchal attitudes, and now you can imagine that there is also sexual harassment at workplace. In India, there is a law which has been formulated, and it is 10-year-old law. In 2013, law was formulated for sexual harassment at workplace. It mandates that every institution which employs 20 people and more, not 20 women, 20 people and more, should have a committee which will look after prevention of harassment, sensitization of staff, and so on and so forth. But it is still work in progress. Many institutions still don't have them, and as a result, sexual harassment continues. It is difficult or impossible to raise issues against heads of schools, departments, institutions, universities, because most often they are men. So there is a barrier of communication, and there is also a barrier of patriarchy because men are in power, and that is why such issues become problematic. There are also policy level issues, which I'm sort of separating from the social issues because they do matter, especially for women scientists, or I should say research priorities in any country. They normally, women, or here I'm also bringing third gender LGBTIQ community because they have problems which are even worse than women. The only thing is that third gender community as a proportion of the society is much lower as compared to women, who are 48-49%. So these underprivileged communities of women or third gender do not manage to express their views. Their opinions are not considered, their priorities are not considered. I would give just one example, since we are talking about toilets in this slide. The third gender people have been asking for separate toilets which can be used for third gender. So if there is a 3-story building of somewhere, at least have one toilet designated in each floor, if not at least one in 2 floors, that can be used as a third gender toilet, because otherwise it is very difficult. So such issues can also not be raised, and forget about asking for issues, research issues, which are more concerning women or third gender. So this is something that I have mentioned as the last point here. Research priorities are decided by men at the helm because they are in the majority, they are powerful, they control funding, they control various aspects of research. Here I'm, as I said, focusing a lot more on scientists rather than teachers. So research priorities are decided by men at the helm. So women, for example, there is pretty much very little work done, and I can give this as an example on menopause of women. So because there is no funding allocated. In contrast, on women's contraceptives, huge amount of funding is allocated for research. Why is this priority? Because once women go beyond stop menstruating or approaching menopause, they are of no interest for men, in a manner of speaking. This might look too bold, but that is what normally is perceived. So this is my last slide, and I'm simply trying to show you the principles of how to address disparities, gender disparities in science, so STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and medicine. So I'll go through them one by one, and these are sort of, way forward. So dedicate funds for research and programs to facilitate better inclusion of women in STEM. So how do we go about? Those could be the questions, which will be region specific, which could be institution specific, but the principle is what should be followed. Document success metrics by gender, particularly when new policies are implemented, and revise policies when they are not having an intended effects. For example, there are some schemes which are floated by Government of India where only women can apply because women need to be encouraged. So if such schemes are running for 5 years or 7 years, then the success of these women should be considered as part of the science community. That are their numbers become higher because of this support equity which is being provided, or is it still something that's deficient, and hence we need to continue with such things. So those are the evaluatory frameworks which also need to be established. Recognize that policies and programs need to prioritize women. That is, the programs and should not be gender neutral. Most commonly, if they are gender neutral program, it is essentially like equality that we were talking about. Men will be given support, women will be given support, but women need more support. Transgenders would need more support. Underprivileged people will need more support. That's where the equity is. And the last point is actively prioritize the inclusion of women in influential roles and committees. This is attempted, but you also need women who are aware of patriarchy as a major hurdle and have the capacity so that their voice can be heard properly. If there are women who are so much ingrained into patriarchy that they find it very hard to open their mouth in a committee, presence of such women may not help. So one also needs sensitization of women so that they will influence the policy in a better way. So that's where I'll stop, and I'll stop sharing the screen, and then we can, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for your informative talk. I must add one comment on that. the scenario of India is not much different than Bangladesh. I'm sure this scenario is in other Asian countries, or maybe the other countries as well, more or less same. Because I was in Germany at that time for my postdoc. I often see the same scenario for the German women in science at the same way. So it's not much different anywhere. Ma'am, we have some questions for you regarding your career and also your thoughts about the society and women in science, and also we will take some questions from the YouTube if they have any specific question about the presentation. So we'll go on with that. Is that okay for you, ma'am? Okay.
Sure.
Okay, ma'am. First question will be like, can you share a bit about your journey and how you become interested in science?
Uh, well, I was a medical student. I finished my MBBS and I was trying to see where would I go from that point. And at that time, during internship, as you know, we have 1 full year of internship and enough time to think, in a sense, about what can be done in as a career. And during that time, I was reading various things and I realized two things. One is routine practice is something that did not attract me. So I didn't feel like practicing as a doctor, where, of course, there is a very high level of day-to-day satisfaction because you are treating patients and patients would come and say thank you. And it's like, you have done a great job. Somehow that I was not attracted to that. And as I was reading about what can be done, I got interested in research. And in particular, I read a couple of books on immunology. So at that time, both immunology and neurobiology were the areas where there wasn't much research happening, or that there was enough scope to do research, I should say. Somehow, I thought immunology is more challenging to me. So I decided to pursue that. And slowly, so during my MD, so I opted for MD in microbiology, which had immunology as a tiny fraction of this, and this is MD in medical microbiology in a sense. So in that there was immunology as an option. So I started pursuing MD, thinking that if I do not get interested in research after trying it during my 3 years of MD, then I still would acquire an MD and I can go back to medical practice. So I wasn't sure myself either whether this will be a choice. And as I said, for me, it was major shift in the profession from being a medic and a so-called practicing doctor to a researcher. So those 3 years of research during my MD were extremely exciting, and I realized that this is where I would like to continue, and I have stayed on. So in that sense, science as a career was a very active and challenging choice at that time. Of course, people told me you won't get enough money because doctors tend to earn a lot more. But I said to them that university professors live well. So why shouldn't I get less money than them? So I would be okay. Fortunately, all of that fell in place, and I got a job in Delhi after completing my postdoc stint in London. So getting a job and then staying there and pursuing career was not too problematic.
Yeah, I understand. I can actually your this informations and everything tend me to ask two questions at the same time. First one, I would like to ask, like, what exactly motivated you to, like, from research to come back into the research, or make you interested in women in science? Like, how did that happen? First one. And second one is, ma'am, it is related to gender disparities. So I will ask the question in a while. Just you can answer the first.
Okay. So I should say that I was attracted towards feminism even during my MD days. So when I was in Mumbai, I was attending some meetings which feminist groups were holding. So I was also part of some other activities in Mumbai, not very actively because I was doing my MD. But slowly and steadily, I realized that I am getting attracted towards feminist thought. And because of that, the background was very much in my mind. But when I spent 4 years in London doing my postdoc, at that time, this thought was not in my mind that what will I do, whether I will use it or not, as the feminist thought in my career. But when I came back, I had very clear understanding in my mind, or very clear drive in my mind, that I wanted to get connected with the society in this country. So if I want to do that, I do need to speak the local language. So I looked for a job which was either in Maharashtra, because I was born and brought up in Maharashtra, so I speak local language Marathi very fluently. And if that is not possible, that Hindi speaking belt, because Hindi is something, again, we learn in the school as a second language, national language. So I looked for a job in such areas. Fortunately, I got one in Delhi, and my interest always was to do something to engage with societal issues in one manner or the other. So coming to Delhi and establishing lab took some time. And when I was ready to publish my first paper, or actually when my first paper was published, it was my PhD student, a very close colleague of mine who is also an immunologist, and me, as three authors. And in biology, the last author is the corresponding author, senior author, whichever way you look at it. So when that paper was published, many people, rather than asking me about the paper and the work, asked the middle author, who was my colleague, saying, "So how is your paper? I'm so glad to hear that your paper is published." He, poor fellow, kept saying, "Well, yes, I am an author, but I'm a middle author. Vinita is the last author, so you should talk to her." But this kept happening. And around that time, I realized that despite me being the corresponding author, I was getting sidelined. So this is something that I obviously connected with feminism, and then started thinking about the status of women scientists in the community, and slowly mulling over it, talking about it, writing about it, and then obviously developing the issue and my thought process a lot.
Yeah, ma'am. I wanted to ask you about the family of yours. Like as you were in MBBS, do you have any, like from my childhood when I was a young kid, my parents used to tell me that I have to be a doctor. But at the same time, I don't have a brother, but other my friends who are a male or a boy, they're always asked to be an engineer or something like that. Did you have the same scenario in India, or did you have the same pressure over there?
When I was a student, and as I said, this was many years ago. I entered MBBS in 1974, so before any of you were probably born as well. So at that time, situation was not different, but it was different. That there were only two avenues which anybody who entered science and was likely to get good marks would choose, either engineering or medicine. At that time, people in science did not think so much about administrative service, or police service, or being a lawyer, or being a business manager, or anything of this kind. Just two options: one was medicine and one was engineering. And for a woman, medicine was considered as the best option, because at that time there was no information technology as part of the engineering group. So this was, civil and mechanical and something or the other, electrical, metallurgy. So these were not considered women friendly areas in engineering. So in a way, it was too straightforward. I got good marks. I could get entry into the medical college. So it was too simple in that sense.
Okay. I can connect you in a way, ma'am, because well, when I finished my master degree, I somehow cleared the BCS exam, which is Bangladesh Civil Service, and joined as a DM if in Bangladesh. But I was always interested in research. So by that time, I already started my PhD. So I came back in research. But I had a great pressure from my family not to join in research, but to stay in that job, because which is very, like prestigious in terms of Bangladesh and an Indian subcontinent. So yeah, I can understand your feeling towards the research. But at the same time, we face the problem as well. So, talking about the gender disparities, I wanted to ask a few questions regarding that. How do you really perceive the current status of gender disparities in the STEM fields? At the same in the field where women are also a part, although you already mentioned some in your research or your presentation, but specifically if you have any comments on that.
Well, what I noticed is that since I myself have been plugging at this issue for many years, there was some effort in India, as was mentioned in my introduction, that there was a committee, high-level committee, which was established to take stock of the situation, that how badly women in science are doing. So that in itself was an useful exercise. The unfortunate part is in India, we think of many good things to do, including in law, and the implementation is a disaster. So this was also, I wouldn't say a disaster, but it was not implemented. The policies that we recommended, I didn't go through that, but we made quite a few recommendations based on ground level survey of Indian women scientists to figure out what needs to be done, what should be done, and how can it be done. And unfortunately, none of that got implemented. But there was some pressure built, because of which few things. I mean, I know I don't need to mention this, but I earlier also said that creche and toilets, these are such minimal requirements. So some of them are getting done. There is also a sort of a requirement these days that in every committee, selection committee, or whichever committee that is constituted, there should at least be one woman. So it's an advantage and it's a disadvantage, because as I said, if the woman is not sensitized to women's issues, then still questions do get asked in interviews to only to women who, for example, those who are appearing for postdoctoral positions, that are you married? When are you planning to have your child? This question never gets asked to a man. That's the patriarchy that I'm talking about. So only women, of course, it is true that woman will get pregnant and she will need to take leave, but it is not a fault of hers. It is, in a sense, something that is natural, and her husband has also contributed to the process. So this contribution of men is completely sidelined, and woman is victimized, saying that you will get married, then you will go on leave, and what will happen, and so on and so forth. So if a woman is sitting in the committee, the idea is such discriminatory questions should not be asked. But they were very routinely asked when I was new in the field. But I gather that the frequency with which such questions are asked is going down. So that there are in some cases, in some institutions, there are really flat rules that you will not ask any personal question to whether it's a man or a woman who is coming for the interview. You will not ask for marital status. You will not ask for this. You will not ask for that. But still, somewhere or the other, it keeps happening. So that's why I said that some progress has been made, but not enough. So I do see a positive impact, but these are still things that need to be done under pressure. And as I said, if the woman sitting there herself is a victim of patriarchy, which she hasn't realized, then she very easily follows what men in the community are doing without thinking for women's equity and equality. So that is something that we need to do. Not only sensitize men, that is phenomenally required and is not happening, but even women need to be sensitized. And for that, I do feel that women's groups, women scientist groups can be formed. I'm not talking about unions, but I'm talking about, for example, there is a group called Women in Physics. It is an international group, and in physics, women were in very high minority, practically absent. Sometimes in a group of 50 men, there might be just one single woman scientist. That was the situation. That's normally not in biology, whether it's a plant biology, zoology, or biochemistry, life sciences. It is not that bad. But because of that, women in physics as well as women in mathematics, same problem in mathematics as well, they came together to form sort of a group which can be useful for newcomers, because newcomer women would be can seek advice from the seniors. In a sense, senior women can function as mentors. They can give advice about how to go this way, that way, approaches to use if there are any difficulties. So such groups are present, and women in physics is a significant presence in India. I don't know so much about women in chemistry, haven't heard, but I know for sure women in biology does not exist. So I do think that women in biology internationally as well. So I know, for example, there are women in immunology in United States. But that is of, I mean, since I'm an immunologist, I have heard about that, but there isn't such group available. And I think many women find it very hard to get any advice even during their career, because there is this barrier which is always there. They find it difficult to approach men scientists. Men scientists may not be sympathetic, may be dismissive, may not give good advice, whatever. So in that sense, having somebody with whom you can have a dialogue is absolutely necessary, and I do think that should be pushed for if it does not exist already.
Mm.
And there
Well,
are other issues, but I mean, many other small things can be said.
you have like coined a very important term. It's called sensitization, right? For example, if we are talking about the sensitization, not only about the committee members who are men and women, at the same time we should sensitize the person who are the interviewing person, like I'm giving the interview. I should have know my rights as well, what question can be asked. And at the same time, I'm not saying that we have to, like every time we have to protest that you cannot ask the question, but we should know our rights so that at least we can communicate in a fair ground, so that they are much more, like familiar to our point of view as well, which is very much needed. So far, as we are talking about the many groups in science and everything, I don't find any groups who are specifically talking about the women in biological sciences. And even I'm not from the other groups, but in Bangladesh, I remember there was one seminar or one workshop has been organized by the women in physics. One of my colleagues, I saw some pictures from their social media, so that's how I know. But I never ever find any organization or any sensitization from the women in biological sciences. Although in Bangladesh we have many renowned scientists from biological background. They are really, really famous, but maybe they don't have, or maybe they don't face that much of problem. So that
No, I think you are right. You are right, and that was the problem. I also personally did feel I knew about women in physics. There is also a group of Indian women scientists called Indian Women Scientists Association. So I became life member soon after I came back to India. And unfortunately, there isn't any activity which will sort of push for women's agenda, which is present in the that Women Scientists Association. So I was disappointed. But I also thought, when you're mentioning about biology, that I also realized that there are many more of us in biology. 10%, 15% is not a small number. So maybe we don't need being together, the camaraderie, as much as women in physics or mathematics do need. But I am noticing now that this also is requirement, because women can more easily talk to women. They can engage in conversations or have social activities together, so that bonding is very much there, and that bonding at times helps. It need not be simply mentor and mentee relationship, but it can also be somewhat junior and somewhat senior people women coming together as friends. So that also helps. And I think so, by slowly and steadily, I have started saying this again and again, that I didn't think of it. It was a mistake, but I think it should be done. And some groups of women should come forward and actually try to take this to building international community. Start with maybe local, not global, but community for women biologists.
I know one scientist from Nepal. Her name is Babita Paudel. She is a fantastic scientist. And whatever I found I met her last year in Nepal in an international conference. And every time I found her, it's really encouraging because she's trying to pull all the women together in Nepal. Although they are a very small community, but she always said that they have, like they don't have that much of opportunity to get into the science. So she is doing that, and she has a fellowship from Humboldt to organize these women in one umbrella. So that is very much encouraging.
I should also make a small reference, if I may. When I was a member of Prime Minister's Task Force on Women in Science, I think in 2008, 8th of March, we actually organized the group, organized national level conference, science conference for women scientists. So essentially, speakers were all women. We could find women. At that time, you won't believe there were 500, something like 5 to maybe 700. It's very far back. Certainly above 500 women who were present in a meeting in Delhi for 2 days. And you should have seen the kind of atmosphere and kind of friendship camaraderie that was existing. Unfortunately, the task force was ending soon after that. We could not capitalize on it. But I wish we had capitalized so that by now there would have been a group of Indian women scientists who were active in supporting other women scientists.
Yeah, that's very encouraging, ma'am. That tempt me to ask us a different question. Like, do you think really having more women in science really positive have some positive impact on the research and innovation?
I think yes, and I'll give you an example which is my favorite. So I did refer to it in the passing in my formal talk, but everywhere in the world, women used contraceptives for family planning, right? There are 5, 6, 7 different methodologies available for women. Yeah, starting with the diaphragm, so to say, diaphragm. There is also copper tea. There are pills which are available. There are also injectables available, hormonal injectables. So use of hormones is very common in one form or the other, female hormones in the contraceptives. So this is fine, but this gives an impression that men do not need to do anything for contraception. The only thing that's available for men is condom. Even today, there is only condom. And the equivalent of condom, there is also a female condom, but there is also diaphragm. So those two are sort of common. Apart from that, men have nothing. So I'm not taking into account vasectomy and tubectomy as the terminal methods, but in sort of interim methods. Why is this? Is it the case that biologically speaking, from looking at reproductive biology, it is impossible to develop any contraceptives for men? I think not. I think it is patriarchy. Because men were in charge, men could easily say, you become pregnant. Do I become pregnant? So you have to use the contraceptive. Why should I use it? But you may or may not remember, but vasectomy gained a bad name in India during what we call as India's emergency, which Indira Gandhi had imposed in 1976 and thereabouts. So at that time, there was really bad use of men's vasectomy, which was done. It backfired so much so that actually vasectomy as a terminal method for men is operationally, meaning surgically, very, 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 very simple as compared to tubectomy, for which the woman's abdomen has to be opened, which means there is much more scope for complication. So, despite that, vasectomy is not done, tubectomy is done. So, why is it? Because every man points fingers to his wife or whoever he's impregnating, saying, you become pregnant. I don't. So, you have to do something. This is the attitudinal problem. If women were in charge, I do keep thinking, or women should be in charge and they should be pushing for research on male contraceptives and not female contraceptives. But as I also said, issues like COPD, I don't know whether you know this, but there is not COPD, I'm sorry. There is metabolic syndrome where women have problems with their ovaries. So ovaries become dysfunctional. There are other associated problems. If you look globally, this kind of this area is not researched as well as many other areas. Women's menopause is again an area where there are not just hormonal changes, but there are also changes in the psyche, as in the psychological changes as well as physical changes. Like osteoporosis is seriously enhanced. There isn't funding directed towards such problems which are of serious concern to women. Cancer is a separate thing, but this is, some areas are actually not handled, not focused on. Hence, I feel that it should be done. The other thing where I was talking at the beginning of my talk about sort of home-based science, right? So, providing clean water supply. Is this so difficult? But the women who are political representatives in Indian Panchayati Raj, so they are really heads of small villages, they are showing a different priority in their work. They want good water supply, continuous water supply, good toilets so that their menstruation and other harrowing experience will be eased. Men did not think of this. I'm not necessarily saying all of these are research problems, but these are problems related to women, her health, and related issues. They are getting sidelined. Only women become to power do they start thinking about it. So I'm sure many more areas can be thought of, and so women being in the leadership position, women being in a position that is sort of responsible position, funding decisions, all of this can be used successfully. And many men actually think, and this is what I want to highlight, many men think, if I'm talking about women and women and women and patriarchy, men forget that patriarchy also is a problem for them. They are always expected to be, do not cry, you have no option but to be in a service and earn so much of money, you have to do this, you have to do that. These are the burdens that men also face. If women are going to share equal responsibility of earning, equal responsibility in many other things, these problems which drive men also mad in a different way, those also will decrease. So getting to a stage of equity for men and women is an advantage not only for women, but it's also an advantage for men, which currently they are not willing to accept. I think we need to talk a lot more about that.
That's for sure. Actually, ma'am, if we are not really indicating any position which is a higher position, maybe for men and women, anyone could be, but it is related to, the institution and the policies. Okay, so any institutions and the policy makers should understand, despite of being their gender and everything, they should think about the problem. As you mentioned, that this is also true, that men are they are also human, they have their own mind too. It's not like they don't have any feelings, right? But at the same time, society put a pressure on them that they have to be always strong. But I know many people, they are not really strong in their mind, but they pretend to be.
Yes.
So this burden should be also removed from their side as well. Ma'am, do you think the institution and the policymakers may, like play some supporting role for women specifically, and do you see any room there so that for improvement in future?
There is a lot of scope for improvement. At least in India, there was an informal rule in government jobs that husband and wife will not be employed in the same institute. This was for scientists, and this was not a written rule. Okay, this was not a written rule, but it was followed as a convention. So when I was working at the National Institute of Immunology, I know many of my colleagues, junior to me, who have wives who are also scientists. None of them were given a job in NII. But because Delhi was a place where there were many other research institutes also, some of them started working in Delhi University or Jawaharlal Nehru University or somewhere else, somewhere else. So many of them actually got jobs. But this is not possible in every place. So if there is only one research institute in a particular city, because it's an upcoming city, those wives normally are completely deprived of the opportunity to work. So this is a policy which can be modified or which actually should be stated. Like I was talking about asking questions, not asking questions to women about their personal lives. The women and wives should be encouraged to apply, and both husband and wife should be considered. In India, it is called as two body problem. I'm sure it is probably called everywhere like that, but this two body problem normally is highly problematic for women, because women are younger in age by convention, men are more old, and because of that they finish their PhD first, they finish their postdoc first, they finish other things first. And women of course are not only younger, but they also get pregnant, because this is 25 20 30 age group. So they get pregnant, they lose some time, or even if they don't try to decrease the loss of time minimally, they are not as optimally functional as they would have been otherwise. This is something that most pregnant women and women who have gone through delivery and leave would tell you. So this is something that is very much a problem, and hence I do think that sensitization for the head selection committee to employ women should be women along women meaning wives. I'm here saying wives and husbands together is important. And this seems like people are favoring women by giving them a job because the husband is better, but that's not always the case. And again, I'm making this as a point of equity, that woman needs a bit more push because she's younger, she has lost 1 or 2 years in her pregnancy, so give her a little bit push, and give man just the basic opportunity, her husband. So if that's the kind of support which is given, one higher and one lower, I'm sure in 4 years time woman will be as good as her husband. So that's something that one needs to invest in, think about it, and if possible get into the policy, which it is not there right now. But in ISER Pune, for example, in the Department of Biology where I work, there are husband and wife who were employed together.
Mhm.
So the rule essentially was active, no, I'm sorry, convention was actively broken. And wherever they could find, where the people who were in selection process, they actually, there are 3 or 4 couples within biology itself that I can think of who are employed. And I don't see that as a negative.
Mhm. Okay, ma'am. Then what about, like, for example, as you say that husband and wife are, as a couple, they are employed in the same institute. That's a very plus point. But do you think that might, like, discourage or could be detrimental to the other potential candidates?
Well, any new employment, by whether of a man or a woman, is detrimental to remaining people, right? So why should we worry about this?
Mhm.
As long as one can get good people to work with, that should be considered as a plus point. So
Mhm.
that's why I'm saying, if there is only one position and out of 50 people interviewed, only one was selected, it was negative for other 49.
Yeah, that's
That's
true.
not, I mean, that's how we get into competitive places and competitive exams and tend to seek whatever we are trying to seek.
Mhm. Okay, ma'am. Talking about the sensitization, I another thing came to my mind about the mentorship. Like, what is your opinion about the mentorship in supporting the career development of a woman in science? Like, do they need a separate mentorship, or is there any other scope of mentorship for them?
Uh, Two things about it. One, they're having senior women as mentors helps, because all said and done, I'm sure Bangladesh is not particularly different, but there is this problem about women talking to men, especially a stranger. It might be her boss, it might be a colleague, but it is not a family member. So normally there is this issue of awkwardness, issue of what others will think if I'm talking to a man. These issues are important, in the sense they are obstacles for getting familiar and getting established in a particular workplace, and hence mentorship is useful. So having mentors identified within an institution, man, a woman, maybe even a transgender, if it comes to that. But having mentors identified and possibility of choosing will be useful, because then it becomes also mentor's responsibility to provide input from based on his or her experience for the newcomer. But having them of both genders, minimally man and woman, is required. That is something that is not always the case, and it helps. So there are people, but mentors also have a responsibility, in the sense that if I'm trying to guide somebody, the person is not a child, right? The person is an adult with his her own mind and ability, technically ability to think, ability to take decisions. So some mentors I have seen who take it upon themselves that if somebody is my somebody is there, my ex-student, PhD student, or my ex-postdoc, it is my responsibility to find a job for him or her. So I'll do anything in my hands to get a job. I
Mhm.
don't see that as a good mentorship, because giving advice is good, and then the person should think for himself or herself and then move on, because every step one has to take a decision. How long am I going to feed the decision to my juniors? I can't, and I should not. So in a way, talk, provide the pluses and minuses of every position, provide little bit of help which is required, but pushing by the mentors for their so-called mentees, I hate this word, but it is used very regularly, for their mentees for this particular job or that particular job, is something that I do not like. I do not like to take their life in my own hands. I
Mhm.
want to advise, and that's the system that I have been following. I don't go go on giving positions or whatever jobs for them, but I simply provide enough advice as and when required. Sometimes going a little more actively towards giving advice, but not a job.
Mhm. Ma'am, definitely what you were talking about is really, really an important for all the women out there. Not only women, for all the scientists, I would say. You remind me, my PhD supervisor, Dr. M. K. Reddy from ICGB, he used to say always like Tamina, I'm not going to spoon feed you. Like you have to find your own way. I can advise you very well. I can show you the path, but you have to work by your own. That's very important. Okay, so. Very, very nice, ma'am. I'm really encouraged by the words from you. Now, ma'am, talking about like the women and the work environment and everything. Now, there is a term always we talk about, or a concept we talk about, the balancing the career and the personal life. Like, what's your takes on that side?
Well, uh, everybody has to balance many things in life. And whether you call it balance, whether you call compromise, whichever way, it has to be done, because otherwise uh, it's hard to move ahead. So I do feel that women are asked to look after the family responsibilities a lot more than the men are, and that becomes a disadvantage, in the sense, for example, even when, I mean, I know many youngsters as compared to me, like you essentially, but those who have spent time outside India and have come back and have taken up jobs, I do see that many more of such couples help each other in daily chores.
Mhm.
Okay. Still, I don't think cooking is something that the men do as often as women do, or supervise in cooking, because that in itself is a job. Pandemic taught us this, that when everybody was forced to or be only self-reliant because maid servants were not coming. Most working women actually have maid servants in the house who take a lot of responsibility of such household chores, though there are still many more on the woman's shoulder than on the man's shoulder. But during pandemic, because at least in India there was such a strict restrictions, that maid servants did not come to anybody's house. So no maid servants, no cooks, no nothing. So everybody, people in the house had to do themselves. And
Mhm.
then there was, because and this I have heard not necessarily of the scientists, but from many others, that because men were sitting and working from home, they would easily demand their wives to get pakoras for them or something more to eat. We are at home, so why don't we make merry? But in the process, the woman's career, if it was in existence, was completely sabotaged. And if the woman was not working, that was also a problem, because such women also complained that, I used to get some privacy, some private moments of my own to think about myself, to do various things. With man sitting in the house 24/7, I can't get it. So even mental psychological problems were extensively increased during pandemic, when there was this forced co-housing 24/7. But with that, I realized that women do always have more responsibility. And I keep saying this. Women, because as I said earlier, that in many committees, women's presence is considered essential. And I agree to that, that it is a benefit, because somebody is a young woman who is very uncomfortable about facing life for the first time outside her family. If she sees a woman's face, young girl sees a woman's face, she might be more reassured than having 15 men around. So she may simply look at the single woman in the crowd of 15 and answer only to towards her, looking towards her. This I've seen happen. So in that sense, presence of women is useful. But because women are in minority, you should ask how many committees women scientists sit into as compared to average numbers I'm talking about, as compared to men. They always end up spending more time in committees. Okay. And how do you compensate for that? Because working hours are the same for men and women. They have this additional administrative chores, even if they are not the senior most person or the head of the institution. So, such issues which take up women's work, including housework, should get considered while looking for her progress, looking for her promotion, looking for many other avenues for her progress, and which is currently not happening at all. And I think that is where the imbalance that you were talking about, rather than balance, is creating problems for women.
Yeah, ma'am, you were talking about the household chores, about the men engaged during the pandemic. They have just, maybe they have started doing the chores for the housework and everything, but the pandemic made the women much more efficient in everything. Like me myself become a baker on that time, like because I didn't. I have enough time to do something on that time, so I have started, like some personal things. So many people become a gardener, like the household, they are started this small kitchen garden and everything. Maybe for men, they just started helping in the household things. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's the everyday thing we
I
do.
think I think you should now check how many men are continuing the new hobbies and new work input that they gave during pandemic.
Yeah, yeah, true. I don't think so now. That's
Sorry, you are frozen. Do you want to switch off the camera, Tamina?
Maybe, ma'am, some issue with the internet. Maybe some issue in it.
I'm sure there is a linkage
Yes.
problem, linking problem.
Ma'am, many women are appreciate your talk as usual. I can see all are yes, 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 yes. That's right, that's right, that's right. These things are happens here, and let's wait for Tamina. In the meantime, I will ask one
There are
two
YouTube-based
questions.
questions,
Yes,
maybe
some
one
some
who.
YouTube based questions. Uh, Definitely they are going to covered by Tamina's talk, but there is a question like uh, Sudheshna Chakravarti, Dr. Sudheshna Chakravarti. She also point out one thing that I am facing similar situations. In spite of clearing interview, I get rejected on the basis of being a woman. They point out once I get married, you will leave the job. Please suggest how to deal when when the interview are going on and they are figure out that you are maybe married or you have some other burden, then how to deal the interview question.
Honestly, at an individual level, for the person who is getting interviewed or the person who is interviewing, it's not easy to handle this situation, because the person who is getting interviewed is the powerless person and the other person is the powerful person. So a powerless person, even saying two sentences saying you should not be asking me these questions and I promise that I will do hard work, nothing of that kind is useful. So that's why I said that individually solving these questions is always a problem. So, what I was saying earlier, some institutions actually have made rules and they are circulated to the panel before the interview that you will not ask these kinds of questions. So, pushing for such rules is a way to deal with it, but individually, nothing can be done. And especially for the underprivileged, it is very hard. And that's why I'm saying that women who are in the committee or sensitive men who are in the committee should actually work towards publicizing. We talk about transparency in many ways, that this should be transparent, that should be transparent. So even this point should be on the institute's website, for example, that we actually follow a policy of not asking questions regarding personal life to whether it's a man or a woman or a transgender person, because these issues are really, really problematic. So look at whatever, I know we are all very fond of the word merit, but look at the capacity of the person to work regardless of the background and make a decision on employment or non-employment. But individually, nothing can be done, because if one person, despite distributing such things, asks at that time, if anybody else objects, it's a fight in the board, in the room, and it still doesn't help the actual candidate who was interviewed. So that's not the way to go about it, but implementing policies is the way to go about it.
Because they are already mindset.
Yeah.
So it's
Oh,
very
it needs
difficult
to.
to whatever you wanted to say, they are not going to listen. So
Precisely.
Tamina is back now. So Tamina, please continue. I just came for one question, and I
No.
will. There is two or three questions I select.
Okay. Actually, sorry for my interruption in the internet connection. Ma'am, I was talking about the international collaboration because I was talking about my supervisors. When I found them in my department, they are very active in collaborating with the foreigners. Like from Germany, USA, they have so many collaborations. And as their student, I was lucky to, like connect so many foreign scientists. But if you compare the female scientists from my department, I would say we were not that much progressive on that time. I'm not talking about now because so many young scientists like me already they have like trained very well during their PhD and then came back to Bangladesh again to serve the country and also the university. They will make or they will change the society for sure. But what about the collaborations and everything? Or like how like we can contribute or collaborate? Is there any suggestion that as a women scientist we can collaborate with the foreigners or foreign countries for the future science?
This this is a tricky question, in the sense there are the group that I was talking about, women in biology, women in science, whichever way you look at it. So if it is more of a global kind, then finding international women collaborators is one way of approaching, because in meetings, this I'm extrapolating from physics group, women in physics group, that they meet internationally, I think, as their meeting, and it's really women in physics meet. Okay, so they meet every 2 years or every 3 years, I forget, but that is where they get connected and interact. Finding collaborators is, in a sense, easy, because you have free access conversation without any other disturbances. So that's one way, but it is going to be a long way ahead, because women in biology, since we are here sort of in biology, broad biology area, even group of women in biology does not exist. But the other way is, I find it difficult to collaborate with people if I don't know them. So this is a problem, and knowing people is again an obstacle in our society, because knowing women becomes easier, meaning connecting with women becomes easier. Connecting with men outside the country also becomes a bit bit problematic. Because again, the barriers, social barriers exist, that if I'm very free in talking to a man from another country or even from this country, I will be, the fingers will be pointed at me saying, she does this and that. So we can't easily break those barriers. They do need to be broken. But at the same time, because of these barriers, I find it easier to talk to women scientists and get moving, because at least this objectionable part doesn't come our way. Okay, so this is escapism right now, you can call it compromise. But there are enough women scientists. As it is, there are few women scientists in India, few women scientists in Bangladesh, and few in the US. But if those get connected, then it's not major problem. So internationally also trying to find women who are in the field, and if they are in your field, and seeking collaborations might be one way of going ahead. And things can spread later on to men as well. Or as I said, one way of doing it is, if you have worked in a lab with many postdocs when you were doing your PhD or doing your postdocs, those contacts sometimes become very useful. So if you have maintained those, then through those contacts or with them, collaboration is one way of going ahead. But no single or easy answer.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like I remember my collaborations and everything from my postdoc labs actually, because I have a group of friends over there, and they are very much like active. And on that time we were from different countries. So our supervisor or my mentor from my postdoc lab, he was very enthusiastic about the foreign people. They are coming from different countries, and that's how we have connection in India, in Sri Lanka, and also in Germany. So in so many labs, that's very important, as you say. I would like to ask one question. Maybe it's not really supporting the women, but always I found a question from so many students. And if any students have any bad experience during their PhD, the first question they ask whether your supervisor was a woman or not. How do you comment on that?
This is not something that I have come across, because I have come across many. You have to remember that I'm also a woman. So this question may not have been asked to me because I'm a woman, but it's also true that none of the PhD students who enrolled with me left. So they completed their 5 years and moved on. So in that sense, I was probably not the appropriate example of for asking this question. But what is true is that if women are involved, it gets blown out of proportion. Because again, majority are men. In a way, they have their own comradeship of men. They do not include women. So women get isolated, and that's why I was talking about mentorship. So women get isolated. So anything, I mean, as it is, we point fingers at everybody with a minor problem here and there. But if the people who have problems are from my own group, I'm unlikely to be so harshly criticizing them. But if the person concerned is not from my close group, then I'm likely to be harsher. And that is where women come into picture. That men have their own groups and women are not part of that group. Because we see quite often that people who, for example, drink alcohol or smoke or whatever, they will join after office hours and have their own chit-chatting access. There will be information about science and and opportunities shared. Women are deprived of that. Women also don't go for very many conferences because you have young children, or not having a crash at the site of conference and so on. But men do go. So in a way, bonding between men is normally much stronger than bonding between men and women. And as a result, women are normally more harshly criticized, because I have come across many men who also behave badly and who are criticized for not being generous, not being kind, not being helpful, holding on to thesis until you until you work for 3 more years and get so much more data. All of this I've heard about men as well. But the publicity, undue publicity of quote unquote bad behavior is more about women because they are not part of your clique. That's it, I think.
Ma'am, actually, I asked the question to you because of the reason. I think the same way that there are so many incidents happen for everyone, unbiasedly for men and women both. But always it was criticized for the women scientists that maybe they are not behaving properly or something. It was highlighted always. That's why I asked you the question, because in one point we always share the same thought, because when we supervise someone, we don't think as a women or men. We think as a scientist, or we are supervising a work that is good for the students at the end, because it's his or her work at the end. It's not ours. So before criticizing, people should understand the perspective about the thing, not only whether she is a male supervisor or a female supervisor.
I think it's social psychology which we have to take into account, nothing to do with science.
Yes.
Who are you a group of, whether you are part of that group or whether you are not part of a group. That's it.
That's it. That's true. Ma'am, there are so many young scientists or young students are, that they join through, they register for your talk, and also they are listening to you through the YouTube. So there are some questions from their side and for them as well. Like, what advice would you give to the young women aspiring to pursue careers in science, specifically if you have any suggestions for them?
It actually depends on where you are located. So if it is developed country, developing country, within developing country, are you a city dweller, are you a not city dweller? All of these are going to change the responses that I can potentially give. But what you need to do is not get isolated. You do need to connect with people who are sort of your comrades, if I can call that, men and women both, preferably women, because socially it is more acceptable for a woman to be with woman rather than woman with a man, because otherwise unnecessary criticism comes your way. So finding your peer group and working is something that is important, and that is true across any condition, whether you are in a relatively small town to a biggish town to a city to a metropolis, and in any country. So this is something that one will have to look at. The other is talking to your parents. I don't know how useful it is, but if you are you can establish dialogue with the parents so that they would allow you to get educated and pursue your career. Also at the time of, so I know marriage is a trap in a sense that parents are deciding whom you will marry. I referred to love jihad earlier. There is this very specific connotation to that, but essentially I meant love marriage by my choice versus marriage by my parental choice. That's the distinction. But even if you are making a choice to marry somebody, you should be talking to the man or the woman and express what your expectations are from the future, and then only decide on getting married. I understand love can be love at first sight, but that one sight is not going to be sufficient for rest of your life and career. So rather than being emotional, once you realize that you are sort of getting fonder and fonder of a person, establishing dialogue. So you need to think first, what is it that you need? What is it that your ambition is? What is it that you would like to do? That doesn't necessarily mean that you will exactly do what you are thinking at the age of, say, 22 or 23, when you are, say, finishing your PhD or whichever stage you are at. But you should have a broad outline of what you would like to do. If you are completely going into marriage without thinking, then face what you get. If you are thinking, then there should be scope for accepting or rejecting a man, depending on how well you can connect with him. So this also is true for a man when he is trying to connect with a woman. So if somebody after if a woman after PhD simply wants to stay at home, and if a man doesn't want her to stay at home, that's also conflict. It can be the other way around also, that woman wants to work and husband says no, 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 you have to look after your in-laws and be at stay at house. Do you want to marry such a man? So thinking before you stepping into one step in the career, second step in the career, getting engaged and married, and then having children, because all of these decisions are very crucial for the career, but they are individual decisions, and you need to think, how is this going to affect my life, and how am I trying to at least think of overcoming problems which will be there. Is my partner going to be with me, or is my partner going to create hurdles for the path that I want to choose? So establishing dialogue, first thinking on your own what you want, then establishing a dialogue, and on occasions, probably on many occasions, not necessarily going by your parents' wish, because then you may not have access to conversation with the potential partner. That is what I feel is a problem in certainly in Indian societies, where these online websites looking for husbands and potential husbands and wives, and after seeing once, people can get married, or maybe 2 hours of conversation. 2 hours of conversation are not enough because you haven't thought probably things through. But before getting any stage of engagement, marriage, you should have a checklist that this is what I want to do. What is it that you want to do with your life? Are our checklists matching, or are our checklists complementary, so that both of us can have a lot of what we want and compromise on others? If this is not done, then you also lose right to ask somebody questions later on, because you have not done that beforehand. You've fallen in the pattern, which is no questions asked. Then you can't ask questions later on.
Mhm. Sure, ma'am. Actually, the thing is, we are talking about the past and also the present situation about the women in science and the problems we are having. Ma'am, what about the future? Like, how do you see in future how women, like what future we can be expected in near about that we will face or we will go through?
I think you people, I'm saying again, making a distinction between my generation and your generation. But my generation was, mm, in my generation, there were fewer women. They had to struggle more, but they had some advantage of having sometimes joint family. But when they were nuclear family, they had no support at all, because there were no crashes, no nothing. So the struggle was much harder. So as compared to that, situation is somewhat different in at least metropolises is what I'm saying. I can't really include, and I don't have enough experience to comment on very small cities or small towns. But Pune, for example, in India, Pune, Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore, Calcutta, Chennai, these are the big cities in a sense. And I do have a sense of what goes on here. So in a way, and I'm sorry, I have been only once to Dhaka, so no comments on that at all. So all I'm saying is that the situation is better in some ways, but what has happened is two or three different problems. Very recently, there has been a policy change in India where open science, meaning exploratory science, making this as separate from technology. So science, promotion of science is discouraged. In the sense, it's not actively discouraged, but there isn't enough funding. So you can't pursue even if you have interest, because somebody like me who was a wet lab person, not a theoretician, we need money to do experiments. So that money, if it is not available, then it's question of what can I do. This emphasis on technology development, and that too without investing in science, has been seen increasingly in India over the past decade. So that is a problem for younger generation. The other problem, again, sorry, I have only India specific information here, but other problem that we have seen is that the budget for science and technology is either restricted or actually decreasing if you take inflation into account. So it is not at all seriously increasing. And then there are many more people who are working in this country, because our population is big, some institutions, new institutions have come up. So the number of scientists who are working has increased as compared to 25, 30 years ago. So they need more money proportionately. That proportion is not something that is commensurate with the number. So right now, in general, there is a fund crunch that everybody is facing. So this is a stressful situation. And right now, the solution is actually should be at the political level, meaning the policies need to be changed. Who will listen to anybody who is on the ground, and especially somebody like me who is a retired scientist now? That needs to be said, and people need to be convinced about it, and there should be more money given to that. So it's fine. We did a great job for Chandrayaan 3, no doubt about it. But is Chandrayaan 3 going to feed human beings on this earth? Those who are falling ill in India, or those who do not have enough food to eat for 2, 3 days? Is this something that is a problem? Not 2, 3 days, but three meals or 2 meals every day is also a problem. Who is going to fund for that? I'm not saying necessarily science, but science, education, and health should be the priorities, and especially science, because otherwise we tend to look backwards as towards mythology. So myths we assume are the realities, which should not be there. I referred to scientific temper in the earlier conversation, and that needs to be encouraged, and that's not happening. So there are multiple problems because of the political situation, because of religious fervor, because of other problems also associated with the way we as society behave. As a result, I think while there are many more opportunities technically available, I don't know in reality how many opportunities per scientist are available today. That's where my worry is, that we are slowly increasing in number, but are we increasing funding, available funding in the same proportion, which we are probably not. Indian government, and I'm sure many third world countries, tend to spend money in building infrastructure. They do not provide money for maintaining that infrastructure or giving running expenses. This is a problem that is there everywhere. So you may have, Taj Mahals, in a sense, academic Taj Mahals, but are they functioning? That's what we need to ask. And that is something that not me, but actually people in the power currently, who are all men, need to think about, though our finance minister is a woman in India.
Yeah, maybe the situation in Bangladesh a bit different because our prime minister is a woman.
Today only you have a result, right?
Yes. Yesterday we had our national
Yeah.
election. Yeah. So she is very encouraging for the young scientists and also the women. Yeah, that's for sure. But I also agree the same thing. Like they are giving money, in numbers, but the quantity is not enough.
Yes.
Okay, they are just increasing the numbers. Maybe they are giving funding to the 2,000 person, but the amount of money are very less. So in a way that is not really sustainable in my opinion, but maybe that will change. At the same time, I do agree with the comment with that they don't give money for keeping the instruments running or any service or anything. So that is also not sustainable for the long term. Like that we are just spending money, at the end we don't have anything. Ma'am, I have a personal comment from a PhD scholar. She wanted all, I think we discussed already, but she wanted to have a personal
This is
comment.
the one in the chat that you are talking about?
Yeah. I think we discussed already. Shushmita, a PhD scholar, she said that, ma'am, the impact of societal and family pressure for a budding 27 to 28 years old female scientist scholar is very high. What are the ways a science scholar can navigate through this process to achieve? I think we discussed, but ma'am, if you have any personal comment.
Well, in a sense, as I said, individual advice is hard because this doesn't give me any idea about the personal details. Not that I need to know, but essentially, now that you are in this situation, again, opening dialogue with, I assume when you say science scholar and family pressure, I'm assuming you might be married and there might be question about children bringing up. So having a dialogue and arriving at a compromise, it has to be a compromise because you're already in it. Before you get into it, you can possibly explore ways of how much can you achieve post marriage, post family, and so on. But if you are already in marriage and these negotiations haven't been done, then you need to think of at least what is minimally possible. The other option is doing an academic career is always, I shouldn't say always, but it is hard. And for somebody who is a science scholar, there are now other options available. For example, there is science journalism. So, science journalism, again, newspapers have not been covering science so much, but online science journalism, because there are so many new things which are getting reported. So, actually, for spread of scientific temperament, writing into easily communicable language for ordinary people who are not science practitioners, for them to understand is one, what should I say, great way of using one's own capacities. So this is just one approach, but many people have also thought of working as a patent lawyer. So in the patent office, I should say, because patent office has a patent lawyer, but you again need science and technology, a person who is knowledgeable in science and technology, because for interpreting what has come up as a potential patent related issue, you need the science background. So some of these avenues which are outside the mainstream academia or mainstream industry are options available. They are not necessarily in large numbers, but those are the options available as potentially what you can do. If again in industry, the office hours, if you get into industry, office hours are relatively speaking restricted, meaning you can do a 9 to 5 job. Academia is harder for a 9 to 5 restriction, but industry, again, industries are increasing in numbers slowly in India. So that is also an option where you can do routine work if you are not wanting to be very ambitious. Because if you have a PhD, you are a PhD scholar, you said, but once you have a PhD, if you are wanting to run your independent research group, that's not possible mostly in industry at all. You are told that this is the small area you should be focusing on and maybe developing, but those options are becoming available. And industries, Indian industries, especially during COVID, I realized that science related industries are slowly gaining importance and increasing in size and capacity and production abilities and so on. So those are the options to be considered in a way.
Thank you, ma'am. I think Shushmita finds some way to cope up with the situation. Yeah. Yeah, ma'am, from my side, it was the last question. I'm very much honored to talk to you, and thank you very much for your time. Shubho, move on to you.
Ma'am,
Thank you very much.
always, as you can see, Tamina, that how much interest in talk, Professor Benita. It's always encouraging, not only for the women, and I'm sure lots of women are appreciated and correlate the talk and all. And obviously, as ma'am said, that sometimes it's very difficult to answer some personal situations and questions. It have to come from the candidate. But if you need a passion, definitely, then maybe you can come out this situation. But obviously, these are not a good situation, as ma'am pointed out. We should focus on that as a, not as a being a male, but obviously from the society. And yes, ma'am, your thought is very important for us also. One day we are always we are in the top in the system, so definitely we, if, we are most need to more focus. And for me, like for my lab, I'm the only male, and eight are the female candidates. So feminism I learned from them actually. But yes, situations would be more better. Sometimes transportation is the issue. Sometimes people, men are can go for in a bike or in that way, but for the female it's challenges. So there is lot of little bit challenges from the institute also, from the society also, from the government also. And you also start a very important topic, that is the funding issue and utilize the fund. As you mentioned, the Taj Mahal, we have the institutions of which are the Taj Mahal, but very difficult to run them. So obviously, and sometimes I'm afraid to talk about these things in environment, but then we realize that we are not the government, that is the postdoc and get it our own interest. So maybe this is the best platform to start this type of talk. If the people that okay, we should focus and we should also talk about it, not the fellowship. We conduct a webinar on how to apply the fellowship and different type of fellowship. And those that take the fellowship, we invite them to share their experience to getting that particular thing. But yes, now is the time to why it's so less amount in this fellowship. So, and I'm sure Tamina will inspire to build something for the women in the Dhaka University at least. So, and obviously you can relate to Vinita ma'am, and you need any help because she is either Pune and emerging scientist. So, lots of connections we have. So maybe you should start, Tamina, something for starting from the Bangladesh in Dhaka University, and we'll catch up. And
Like I already discussed with my female colleagues that we should start a group from variety of the the scientists. Like we have so many faculties, so from physics, chemistry, and also other biological sciences and everything. We always discuss that we should make start a group of women where we will discuss only the science. um, hopefully hopefully in future, maybe with my colleagues I will start a group. And I was thinking about that I will invite Vinita ma'am. She will be a like great opportunity. I was thinking while I was talking to her, I was thinking that if we have something like that, we should invite her to give a talk, like as she has so much of experiences. And even though with her experience we can start a new thing and also move forward. It was a great talk, I must say. Seriously.
Thank you very much. I'll be happy to support in whichever way possible.
yes, and Tamina, definitely. Not necessary to talk about the science, but talking is important because institutional or departmental collaborations is the issue. You can, I have no shame on it, but yes, it's the issue. If you have a 30 department, I'm hardly you can connect two, three department in a one particular project or one particular publication. So yes, it's another issue, but okay, it's a great pleasure, ma'am. And I'm honored that it will be in YouTube for a long and whatever when we any woman think that I'm depressed, they should listen to it. That okay, it's a challenge, and obviously day by day we should improving, not as a country, as a world, we're going to improve. And when the many female are come to the scenario, then definitely it has to. Thanks, ma'am.
Thank
It's
you. Thank you
great.
very much.
Of, it will be great if we take a coffee break, but it's due. I'll make someday. Uh,
Sure.
okay,
Okay.
Tamina, and all the participants, I just posted a feedback come certificate application link. Those are interested to get a e-certificate. Please fill the form. Filling the form is mandatory. Then otherwise, how I can know you are there? It is your attendance and everything. Okay, stay tuned with Bioingene. Ma'am,
Bye bye.
namaste.
Thank
Namaste.
you.
Thank you,
Bye,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thank you.
Shiva. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye, Tamina. So I'm going to end this session.
Okay.
Okay. Bye.
Have a nice day.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks everybody.